as our chief executive officer effectively fired me at the very party celebrating the $20 million contract I had just secured, the contract that had saved Veltrix Optics from certain bankruptcy. I stood in the Chicago Skyline Lounge, stunned into silence. Derek said, "We need someone with enterprise experience for the next phase." He held a champagne glass in his hand, his smile barely reaching his eyes. The celebration around us continued without interruption, with toasts, laughter, and the clink of glasses, while my world silently collapsed. Rather than ruining 5 years of my career, he added casually, "Bankruptcy HR will be in touch about your severance." Then, he turned to join the board members, leaving me alone with my untouched champagne. My name is Elena Morrison, Senior Client Strategist, or I was until about 30 seconds ago at 39, when I had dedicated countless hours to establishing relationships across continents, taking red-eye flights, and foregoing personal milestones. Bringing this deal home tonight should have been my defining moment, but instead I stood motionless as Derek introduced our investors to Bradley Thompson, my ostensibly more experienced replacement. I took a deep breath, put down my glass, and looked around the room. Nobody was staring at me. The celebration of Veltrix's incredible financial turnaround went on without a hitch as I contemplated that I thanked a few team members who had helped me, being careful not to tell anyone what had happened, and then I slipped out before dessert was served, leaving through the service exit to avoid any awkward farewells. The night air hit me as I stepped onto the street, sobering and clarifying that downtown Chicago glowed around me regardless of my personal circumstances. Now disposable, expendable, a ladder to be kicked away once they'd reached the desired height. As I was checking my phone, I saw 3 missed calls from Natalie Wu, CEO of Orbison Digital, our new client, who had specifically asked me to be the project lead just this morning. The client was unaware that I had just been fired. My phone buzzed again, and this time, Natalie's finger hovered over the screen. I decided to let it go to voicemail, as that would be the professional thing to do, and let Derek deal with the fallout. But after 5 years of developing a relationship, I was hesitant to start lying to Natalie because I had gained her trust by being honest with her. I answered the phone, "Elena, and I wanted to congratulate you once more on the contract." Natalie's voice was warm and excited, but then a warning flashed through my mind. There was something I didn't know yet, something significant that was about to happen, and I could feel it in my bones. Being naturally strategic even before it became my job title. Growing up in a family of 8 taught me to anticipate needs, plan ahead, and know which battles were worth fighting. When my mother became ill, I was the one who made the care schedule, looked into treatment options, and explained complicated medical terms to my siblings. When she passed away, I handled the arrangements while my father withdrew into grief. I was 17 at the time. I advanced rapidly in my career at Veltrix Optics, going from marketing coordinator to client liaison to senior client strategist in just 7 years. I had a knack for figuring out what clients needed, frequently before they knew themselves. That's how the Orbison Digital relationship started 5 years ago. They were a promising startup with cutting-edge technology but little funding. I saw their potential when others saw only risk, and I persuaded Derek to give them favorable terms when everyone else told them they weren't ready. The board had stated that it was not worth the investment, but I saw Natalie's vision and trusted her leadership. More importantly, I realized that we could develop together, with Orbison pushing us to push the boundaries of our comfort zone and Veltrix providing the specialized optical components her technology required. For 5 years, I fostered that relationship, staying up until 2 in the morning. I visited their offices every month while Natalie was in Asia, got to know their business well enough to anticipate their needs, and shielded them from Veltrix's occasional corporate overbearingness. When Orbison's breakthrough came, a revolutionary new augmented reality system that required custom optics, I was the one who arranged the huge deal that would benefit both companies. The $20 million contract arrived just as Veltrix was in dire need of money after a failed product launch and manufacturing problems. The company, and my reward was termination. "Elena, are you still there?" Natalie's voice brought me back to the present. Yes, I apologize, I said, my mind racing. I just went outside for a little air, and I wanted to let you know how thrilled our team is to have you leading this project. Your business and technical knowledge is why my heart sank when I realized that Natalia had no idea what had happened and that Derek had not bothered to tell her about my replacement. That's very kind. I was able to buy some time while I considered my options. In fact, I just emailed your team the detailed requirements document with you copied. We're prepared to move quickly, but I needed to decide right away whether to tell her the truth or let Derek handle it, or was there another option? Something you should know is that I started getting out of the taxi at my apartment building. The celebration tonight wasn't just about the contract, there were also some organizational changes announced. I paused to consider what kinds of changes were coming, and Derek decided to replace me as lead on the Orbison. One that might serve justice while protecting my future. Natalie, we signed this contract with the express understanding that you would be leading the implementation. Your knowledge and comprehension of our technology is invaluable. I closed my eyes in relief and gratitude as the words, "project they're bringing in someone with more enterprise experience," were spoken. The silence on the other end lasted for a few seconds, and Natalie finally said, "That's unacceptable. Do they realize that your involvement was a crucial component of our agreement?" I don't think so, so I acknowledged that Derek seemed engrossed in the celebration and likely believes the contract is secure regardless of who is handling it. Another silence, and I could almost hear Natalie's voice. I thought, Elena, I have some calls to make. Can we talk again first thing tomorrow? Of course, I agreed, but I wasn't sure what my role would be by morning. After the call ended, I went into my apartment and kicked off my heels. The city lights, which I usually loved, twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows tonight, seemingly mocking my sudden professional freefall. I opened my laptop and started writing 3 separate emails. One to Derek listed my accomplishments and questioned the timing of this decision. He sent one to my network announcing my sudden availability for new opportunities and another to human resources asking for formal documentation of my termination. I hadn't sent either of them yet, so I opened a bottle of wine and started going over the project requirements, which Natalie had mentioned were lengthy, hundreds of pages of technical specifications, timelines, and dependencies, of which I was one of maybe 5. Those at Veltrix who could really comprehend its intricacy. Bradley Thompson, my replacement, most definitely wasn't one of them. My phone buzzed with a text from my coworker Olivia, asking what had happened and why you had left the party. Everything was fine, so I stared at the message, weighing how much to reveal that Olivia was reliable, but she also told Derek. Before I could make up my mind, another text came in saying that Derek had been acting strangely since you left the board members pulled. Setting him aside, something was going on, and a chilly smile appeared on my lips. Natalie worked quickly, and then I received a third message that confirmed my suspicions that I was bored and that there was an emergency session in the conference room. Derek looked panicked, so I put my phone down without responding and took a sip of wine. The board was learning what Derek should have known all along, that I wasn't just a relationships are difficult to mend once they are broken, and for the first time since hearing Derek's contemptuous remarks, I felt confident again. The setback still hurt, but I also sensed that an opportunity was emerging that would either give me more authority again or propel me to a better position. In any case, Derek's champagne would soon taste extremely bitter. Morning had fully arrived. I ignored the 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 47 emails, the majority of which came from Veltrix executives and board members as well as the Human Resources Department, in favor of my coffee and the email that arrived at 6:07 a.m. from Natalie Elena. I've made my position clear. My phone vibrated itself almost off the nightstand. The Veltrix board's desperation was evident, but I wasn't prepared to get involved just yet. Let them deal with the fallout from Derek's snap decision. At exactly 9 a.m., my doorbell rang, and when I answered it, I saw Jacob Wells, the chairman of the Veltrix board. Looking rushed in a pricey suit, "May I enter?" Despite my internal joy at his obvious discomfort, He questioned me with his normal confidence obviously decreased. I gestured him inside, maintaining professional courtesy. Once we were seated, Jacob started, "There's been a tremendous misunderstanding regarding your position, a misconception," I reiterated unequivocally. "Is that when the CEO fires someone at the celebration of their greatest accomplishment?" Jacob winced. "Derek was premature in his communication with you. The board had not authorized any staffing changes for the Orbison project, which is interesting." I maintained a neutral expression, but he seemed very confident while holding his champagne glass. Jacob's jaw tightened. We temporarily spent the night in emergency sessions after Natalie Wu called us several times to make it clear that there would be no contract without you. She also mentioned that there was a nuclear option that Natalie had used as leverage on my behalf, so Derek made a unilateral decision that put a $20 million contract at risk. I summarized that as a major leadership failure, and Jacob's expression confirmed that I had hit the mark. "The board shares your." I noticed that Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "But you're here instead of Derek. Why isn't he apologizing?" Translation: Derek was fighting for his job. "What exactly are you offering, Jacob?" "Full reinstatement as senior client strategist with a sizable retention bonus and leadership of the Orbison implementation team, reporting directly to the board rather than via the usual management channels." The offer was impressive but unfinished. "And Bradley Thompson," Jacob grimaced. "He will be moved to another department." I took a slow sip of coffee and let the silence between us. Jacob started to fidget, which I had seen in board meetings when he was nervous. "I'll need some time to think about it. We have until noon to confirm your participation, or they start looking at their legal options for withdrawing," Jacob said, his voice becoming more tense. I raised an eyebrow to indicate that you needed my response. I looked at my watch 3 hours earlier, ideally earlier, and then I got up to signify that our chat was about to end. "I'll give you a call before noon," and I closed the door behind. Visibly unhappy, the board moved even more quickly than I had expected, removing the immediate issue of working with Derek after his betrayal. Their decisive actions suggested genuine remorse or at least genuine fear of losing Orbison's contract, but as I was expecting, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia saying that Derek was cleaning out the office board, forcing resignation, and then promptly confirming Derek as interim CEO. I felt a slow smile come over my face as I looked at the string of progressively desperate messages that kept filling my phone. Another message came in, this time from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Thomas Blackwood, CEO of Crystalline Audio. "I wanted to talk to you about your future lunch today because I think we can offer something far more valuable than damage control." The restaurant that Thomas Blackwood had selected was discreet. As I was shown to his table, I evaluated the man who might be my future. Thomas was tall, about 50, and greeted me with the assured demeanor of someone used to getting what he wanted. Crystalline Audio was Veltrix's most formidable rival, specializing in acoustic optical technologies that complemented many of the same markets. He said, "Your reputation precedes you," extending his hand. The waiter brought water and took drink orders, and we exchanged pleasantries. When we were alone again, Thomas leaned forward and said, "I'll be honest. We've been watching your work with Orbison Digital for a while. The contract you secured is impressive not just for its value but for the strategic positioning it creates." I nodded, wondering where this was going. "Veltrix doesn't deserve you." Furthermore, I noticed that Thomas smiled. "Chicago's technology circle is small, and news spreads quickly, especially when it comes to 20 million contracts and CEOs being fired." My phone vibrated in my purse, probably Jacob becoming more and more desperate as noon drew near, but I chose to ignore it. What Derek did was unethical, and the board's scurrying doesn't erase it. "What precisely are you offering?" I asked Crystalline. "The executive vice president of strategic partnerships, for double your current salary, significant equity, and a seat on our executive committee." The offer was astounding and far above my expectations. "It's not generosity, it's strategy," Thomas clarified. "We want the relationship you've developed with Orbison, we want your ability to orchestrate intricate transactions, and most importantly, We want hiring me would be both an acquisition and a strategic blow to their rival, and if Orbison doesn't follow me to Crystal Finn, as I asked to test his commitment, then we've still gained an outstanding strategist, and Veltrix has still lost. 1. He slid a folder across the table, but the signing bonus alone should make up for any short-term disruption. I opened the folder and was astounded to see that the signing bonus was 7 figures. I accepted this and closed the folder, but there are other factors to take into account, like your duty to Natalie Wu. Thomas nodded. I know that loyalty is a factor, which is why we want you to take the afternoon to think it over. By the end of the day, my phone vibrated once more, and Jacob's 5th call and the Veltrix's deadline was approaching, so I took advantage of the opportunity and said, I'll be back in my apartment with my answer. I laid out my options, and Veltrix offered reinstatement with a direct line to the board, which would be a significant increase in authority. Kristallin was offered an executive position at Veltrix with a salary that would take years to match. But the factor complicating both offers was Natalie and Orbison. I had personally reassured her of Veltrix's commitment and capabilities, so I picked up the phone and called the one person whose opinion I needed. It was Elena. Do you have a moment for you? She always replied. Has Veltrix begged sufficiently? Jacob came to my apartment this morning, and Derek was removed without incident. Natalie firmly stated that's the lowest possible result. I've also received an offer from Crystal Audio. I said, watching the city through my window, executive vice president, significant package, and there was a brief pause before I asked. If you accept, would you reconsider your partnership? I acknowledged the new terms and company, and then I paused again before asking, what do you want, Elena? It was the right question. I had been evading the question of whether I wanted retribution against Veltrix, the prestige of an executive title, or something else entirely. I'm not sure if I acknowledge this, but I have to make a decision within an hour. Let me explain. Natalie indicated that she had a third option that you hadn't thought of by the time noon arrived, so I had already made my choice. Thank God I called Jacob first, Elena. I'm declining your offer, Jacob, he said sharply. Please reconsider whatever Kristallin offered, we'll match it. He knew about my lunch with Thomas, and he clarified that the technology circle was small. I explained that this wasn't about compensation but rather about recognition and respect, which should have come before the crisis, not after it. We can address those issues, as Jacob fervently promised, but don't leave us hanging with Orbison. I've already spoken to Natalie, and she knows that I didn't say anything at that point, so we lost the contract. His voice was flat with defeat, but don't necessarily call Natalie yourself, she'll explain the circumstances in which Orbison might still work with Veltrix. I end the call and call Thomas Elena right away, and he answers with ease. I hope you're Thomas, I'm calling with good news. I appreciate your offer, but I'm declining. Unlike Jacob Thomas, who didn't object right away, may I ask why, if the compensation is flexible and it's not the money but the positioning? You're offering me a role where my value is determined by what I cost Veltrix, which isn't sustainable. Thomas laughed quietly, perceptively, and correctly. Alternative that would be more in line with my long-term interests, intriguing, but the door is still open if your new path doesn't work out. I thanked him and hung up, then opened my laptop to write the most significant email of my career, a resignation letter to Veltrix's board that would take effect immediately. An hour later, my doorbell rang, and Natalie asked, "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," she said as I ushered her inside. "But it's not without risk. The best decisions rarely are," I said, pouring us both coffee. She grinned and placed a leather portfolio on my coffee table. OptiBridge Consulting officially exists once you sign the incorporation papers. This was the third option. Natalie had suggested launching my own consulting business with Orbison as my first client. The contract would be reorganized, and Veltrix would continue to supply the components, but I would oversee the implementation on my own. Natalie reported that the board at Veltrix is in disarray, and Jacob called me right away after we spoke. I explained the new terms, and they would only retain the manufacturing contract if they agreed to collaborate with OptBridge as the implementation partner. I persuaded them to do so. After frantically going over the legal ramifications, they will concede that they have no other option. I felt the weight of the decision as I signed the incorporation papers, realizing that I was now a business owner rather than just a strategist. The risks were significant, but so was the potential. Natalie added that Orbison is willing to provide seed funding for Optib in exchange for a minority stake. Having enough money to hire a small team right away left me stunned. This wasn't just a new job, it was a complete change in my career path. I asked, "Why are you doing this?" and Natalie's expression finally became serious. "I think you'll create something amazing, so I think talent like yours shouldn't be controlled by people like Derek. Because it's good business, we get the expertise we need while investing in a promising venture." As I signed the investment agreement, I thought about how drastically my situation had changed in just 24 hours, from being fired to becoming the owner of a business, from employee to partner, and Derek's champagne toast now seemed like a distant memory. Sometimes, the greatest advantage of all three is being underestimated. Months later, I was standing in Optib's new downtown Chicago offices, watching my team of 12 consultants work on projects for 4 different clients. With the seed money from Orbison, I was able to hire top talent from the industry, including Olivia from Veltric, who was now in charge of our technical integration team. The Orbison implementation was going smoothly under our direction, and Veltrix reluctantly fulfilled their following Derek's departure. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie announcing that the board meeting had successfully approved additional funding for the Phase 2 dinner. To celebrate, I smiled and confirmed that Orbison was thriving with our new manufacturing obligations, as their margins were significantly reduced from the original agreement. This financial consequence further destabilized their leadership. The trust one had developed with Natalie was proving to be more valuable than ever when my assistant knocked on my office door and said, "Elena Jacob Wells is here to see you with no appointment." I raised an eyebrow because, from what I'd heard, Jacob had been having difficulties as interim CEO at Veltrix. Sending him in, Jacob appeared noticeably older than I had last seen him, and his stress was evident in the new lines around his eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," he replied, turning down my offer of a seat. "I'll be brief," he said, "because Veltrix is thinking about a strategic reorganization, and the board has given me permission to look into every possibility." "What alternatives are available?" I inquired, even though I suspected the answer: acquisition by OPIB Bridge. I almost chuckled at the irony that you want me to purchase the business that fired me. Jacob winced. "The board acknowledges the regrettable past, but Veltrix has valuable manufacturing capabilities that would enhance your consulting services. And the valuation would be reasonable, that is, significantly lower than 3 months ago." Jacob didn't deny it, though, and we've lost a number of important clients since. The company that had fired me was now effectively offering itself to me at a bargain price, so I took a moment to appreciate the fullness of this reversal. The acquisition proposal sat on my desk for a week while I conducted due diligence, and Veltrix's situation was worse than Jacob had realized. They were losing talent and experiencing production delays, and had a sizable cash deficit at the end of the quarter, but their manufacturing infrastructure was still valuable and, with the right management, could be a huge asset for OptBridge. The business case for vertical integration was strong, so I called Natalie to talk about the opportunity. "It's poetic justice," she said after I clarified, "but is it good business with the right restructuring?" Natalie was silent for a while, "But if we move forward, I warned the board that authorized your termination would be dissolved upon acquisition. Manufacturing complements our strategic consulting, and we could offer end-to-end solutions that neither Veltric nor OptiBridge can provide independently." After the call ended, I went over the thorough valuation analysis my financial team had prepared, and the figures supported the acquisition at the suggested price, but something felt off. I opened my laptop and looked up news about Derek, and according to trade journals, he had landed a small startup in Austin, which was a significant step down from his previous position. His dismissal from Veltrix had also damaged his reputation. Limiting his options, the revenge narrative no longer seemed relevant. This wasn't about getting back at Veltrix or Derek. Rather, it was about Derek being the catalyst for my current success, albeit unintentionally, without his short-sighted decision. I closed the search and returned to the acquisition proposal. Building something meaningful from an unexpected opportunity. The following morning, I called Jacob to share my decision that OptBridge will purchase Veltrix under certain conditions. I told him that the manufacturing division would remain intact but that the management would be completely restructured. Jacob sounded relieved that the board would accept reasonable terms, and I added that I wanted the champagne flutes from the celebration party 3 months prior. Jacob sounded perplexed. Yes, the champagne flutes were used to toast me when I was fired. I thought it was a personal memento, a symbolic request perhaps, but it meant something to me because those glasses had seen both my career low point and the start of my transformation. They would serve as a reminder that endings often conceal new beginnings. Jacob agreed without further inquiry, probably relieved that the demands weren't more harsh. As I hung up, I eyed the expanding the OptBridge team. We were going to scale up significantly by combining Veltrix's manufacturing skills with our strategic advising. The road from that traumatic night to this moment of success had been Derek's disparaging remarks were abrupt and unexpected. I need someone with experience in enterprise, now looked incredibly narrow-minded. I had created a business from the ground up in 3 months, and it was now strong enough to buy his previous. Sometimes the best kind of retaliation isn't getting even, rather, it's about taking such decisive action that I realized I no longer needed Veltrix's as I observed my team, making the past irrelevant. Champagne glasses to show myself how far I had come. I was also composing a new novel, this time without Derek as the main character. Instead, I would concentrate on my company's future, my vision, and my achievement. The real triumph was that